Welcome back for one more example. So again, to start us off here, let me get back to where we left off. So we were leaving off and we realized that I had to deal with the fact that tangent was negative and what quadrants that occurred in. Cosine was positive, what quadrants that occurred in. And I was looking for the quadrant to overlap. Okay, so probably I would have to say that those are probably the most difficult questions because you have to decide first the quadrant you're located in. All right, so we're going on here to our next example, which off of your worksheet is number 66. So in number 66, they tell you that the tangent of theta is equal to 1/4, right? And then they also tell you that you are to be in quadrant 3. So unlike our last question where we had to figure out what quadrant we're in, they're just straight telling me right now I'm in quadrant 3. So as I go in here and I write down all students take calculus, that's quadrant 3 right there, which is tan and cotan. So you notice that tan is positive. I know that only tan and cotan are positive. So that means every other ratio is negative. So again, I like to start out right away with that information. So I'll write down that the sine of theta has to be negative. The cosecant of theta has to be negative. The cosine of theta has to be negative. The secant of theta has to be negative. The tan of theta has to be positive. And the cotan of theta also has to be positive. Now, again, this is another one of those questions where you already know the tan, so we'll go ahead and put it in. So it was 1/4, so this makes it 4/1. Now, coming back over here in my little workspace, I know that if I know the tangent, I know the opposite and the adjacent. So I know opposite is 1, adjacent is 4. So my hypotenuse would have to be the square root of 1 plus 16, which is the square root of 17. And so remember, we're not trying to simplify or get decimals, so we're just going to leave it like that. So I'm ready to do sine, which I know to do opposite over hypotenuse, so I'll write that as negative 1 over square root 17. So when I flip it, I get negative square root 17 over 1. And then I do my cosine, which is adjacent over hypotenuse, so I say negative 4 over square root 17. And then secant would be the reciprocal, so negative square root 17 over 4. All right? So again, let's recap. If they give me the quadrant, I'll just go ahead here and pick my quadrant out and know at that moment only tan and cotan were positive in quadrant 3 and all the rest had negative signs. In the example before, we had to figure out the quadrant by looking at what information was given. So tangent was given as negative, so 2 and 4. Cosine was given as positive, 1 and 4, so the overlap was in 4. So once I knew the overlap was in 4, I went on the quadrant 4 rules, which was only cosine and secant could be positive, and everything else had to be negative. So remember, to get the opposite and the adjacent, I'm just pulling that from that tangent ratio. Tangent is always opposite over adjacent. I don't need to worry about the negatives because I've already dealt with them. I hope this helps, and that worksheet is pretty easy for you. Please work together with your partner and make sure you complete that worksheet. Thank you and have a good rest of your day.